You are listening to episode number 34 of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Today we're going to be talking about repeaters. We're going to be talking about the Nashua Area Radio Club and a couple other little things. We're kind of changing the format of the podcast a little bit to make it maybe a little bit more interesting. So stay tuned to find out what we're changing. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. My name is Curtis, K5CLM, and I am your host for this podcast. So, I mentioned a little bit just a second ago that we're kind of doing stuff a little bit different than what we have been in the past. And the reasoning behind it is because some extra responsibilities that I have are changing, and I'm getting a lot more stuff on my plate, so I'm not probably going to be able to do a whole lot of the interview style podcast that I wanted to change to. So I'm kind of having to go back to the solo head type thing. But in order to make it a little bit more interesting and just not this boring, how-to type thing, I've decided to throw in a little bit extra stuff, bring back some of the stuff that I did when I first started this podcast by doing some of the news, but also do a couple other little things. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not going to do any interview style things. It's just going to be limited to anybody that is available to record on a Saturday morning, bright and early, because it's going to be like from 7:30 to 9:30 Central Time on Saturdays that I'm going to be able to record. Every other time I really can't, because I'm going to have people working with me now, and that's basically the only 2-hour time frame that I'm going to have where I'm by myself. And I really can't do it at home anymore because of this added responsibility that we have. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm kind of changing it around a little bit. Basically, this is what I'm going to have this nice little welcome message, just kind of talking to y'all a little bit. After that, I'm going to do what I'm calling a Tech Corner segment. And with that, I'm going to do probably about 15 minutes or so, maybe 20 minutes of the actual how-to or the actual learning part of the episode. Then we're going to go on the next segment of our Amateur Radio Club Spotlight, just like I have before. Now, I might be able to squeeze in the Amateur Radio Club Spotlights as interview type things, which is what I really would like to do with those at the very least, because it is kind of boring. I understand that with me saying, okay, this is their website, this is their name, this is when they meet, this is their nets, this is what they do. It would be a whole lot more interesting if I could get y'all or a officer or somebody in a club that I'm doing the spotlight on to actually come and interview and let them tell y'all about their club. So I'm hoping at least that I can do that. We'll see if that happens. After that segment, we're going to do some upcoming events. We're going to be talking about some contests that are coming up, hamfests that are coming up, so on and so forth. And I'm going to try to stick to like a 2-week time frame. When I was getting all the information for all the hamfests, there's like 26 hamfests coming up in the next 2 weeks, so there's quite a bit. I am going to have links on all the show notes to all the hamfests and all the other things that we talk about. So, and then the last segment is going to be on news. Doing a couple news stories, talk about it a little bit, and see how that goes. Hopefully that will make us about 45 minutes to an hour, which is what I'm shooting for. So we'll see if that happens or not. Hopefully it will. So I guess that is about what we're going to do. I might change it up a little bit, might add a little bit, maybe in the news section or something like that, but we'll see how it goes. And, eventually if I get a sponsor or something like that, then I'll put, maybe a little blurb or commercial or something like that in between these segments. Maybe a couple announcements or something like that. But that's the gist of what my podcast is going to be right now, at least for the foreseeable future. Might tweak it a little bit, but that's what it's going to go with. So I guess first thing we're going to do is start on the tech corner. And like I said, today we're going to be talking about repeaters. So let's get on to some learning, shall we? Alrighty, welcome to the very first episode that has a segment called Tech Corner. And in this segment, we're going to be talking about repeaters. Basically, what is a repeater? A repeater is a electronic device that receives weak or low-level signals and retransmits them at a higher power so that the signal can cover a larger distance without degradation. That is the official term. Okay, I'm sure that most of y'all have used a repeater sometime in your amateur life, whether you're brand new to the hobby or whether you've been a ham for 40 years. I'm sure that you've used a repeater, and you know what they're for. You have a handheld transceiver, an HT, or a mobile radio for that matter, and you're trying to talk a longer distance than what you can talk on simplex, and you transmit to a repeater, and then the repeater takes that signal, retransmits it, so you can talk a longer distance. And that's great because, I don't know about y'all, but the area that I live at, I live, 10, 15 miles from my closest ham neighbor. And it's kind of hard to talk to them on simplex when they're that far away. So you talk on a repeater. And the repeaters that we have around here, we have several of them actually around here, but the one that I'm a trustee for, my father owns, and it's on a water tower. And the water tower is like 150 feet, I think, or something like that. And it's up on top of a hill. So going from, ground level, 10, 15 miles away to a higher elevation and then retransmitting at a higher power, you're going to have, a lot better coverage. On this particular repeater, we have about I want to say about a 45, 50 mile range, I believe. And, that is a big difference from a handheld that has, 5, 7 miles in perfect conditions. And then, on top of that, you have your mobile radio. Yeah, you might get 10, 15 miles out of it because it has 50 watts. But you're still looking at not the best way to communicate on simplex. So you use a repeater. Now, these are great. They can be very expensive. We just recently bought the System Fusion repeater, which you can go to my YouTube page and see how we set it up in case you are looking for a System Fusion repeater. Anyways, I got a whole series of videos on how we set that up, and it's really neat. It has a touch screen that you can set it up, and it's all can be done there, so it's really neat. But anyways, amateur radio is not the only one that uses these things. They're used by law enforcement, they're used by EMS, government, military, business. Pretty much everybody uses these things, and for a good reason. It's like, why would you not? Why would you talk with a handheld, especially on like business bands or something like that? Because it's like a lot of times, a couple watts or maybe 5 watts, and you need a bit of coverage. But anyways, back to the amateur side of it. There are several manufacturers out there. System Fusion has one. Bridgecom Systems have one. ICOM has the D-Star repeaters. There are a bunch of them that have the GE repeaters. The radio that we had on our repeater before was a GE, and it was 20, 30 years old or so, but it was still a good radio. I mean, the GE repeaters are workhorses, basically. And I'm sure there's several of them out there that I'm not saying because I don't really know. Um, Motorola has some. But anyways, repeaters are great to have, they're great to use, and you can do a whole lot with them. You can have a repeater serving just your local area, and it has several features that you can put into it. You can use a phone patch. I remember when I was in college, I went about 4 or 5 months without any type of phone, and when I wanted to have a pizza delivered, I could actually go onto the repeater on my handheld and order it, using the phone patch. I could call up Domino's and say, this is what I want, this is my address. Granted, everybody that's listening is going to know that I ordered a large hamburger and pineapple pizza and what my address was, but nonetheless, I was still able to use it. And, this is great when you're, driving down the road and you need to call 911 or something and your phone's not there for whatever reason. You can do that. You can make simple short calls. Most of the time I think they're limited to like 3 minutes or something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's really, there's so much you can do. On top of the auto patch, you can have a weather station hooked to your repeater, and you have all the instruments at your repeater site, and you push a button and it tells you what the temperature is, what the wind speed is, how much rain you've had, stuff like that. You can also hook it to the internet using Echolink, like we talked about last episode, or IRLP, or if it's a D-Star radio, hook it to the D-Star network, or the System Fusion, hook it to the WireX network. All these things are coming about in the past, I don't know, 10 years or so, especially, with the internet type stuff, and making repeaters so much more usable other than just your local area. There's always been links that have existed. There's one, and I don't remember what it is for the life of me, but there is one here in Texas that actually goes from, I believe it's around Lubbock, and it goes all the way to California. And I believe it's something like the Southwest Interconnect or something like that. But it has a whole series of repeaters along like I-10, I believe, that goes from Lubbock over to El Paso, Las Cruces, New Mexico, Tucson, Phoenix, all the way over into, I believe it's like Los Angeles or something like that. And this whole network of repeaters are interconnected, whether that's over like a microwave link or an internet link. And you can go on any of those repeaters and talk to any other repeater in that interlink. And this has been up since I started. When I got my license about 21 years ago now, this was up. And this was one of the things that we used when I went to college in Phoenix. We were actually using the interconnect repeaters going there and back. So it was really neat. And there's even, other ones. There's one, the Independent Repeater Association covers most of western Michigan. There is the Western Intertie Network, the WIN system, that according to Wikipedia covers a great deal of California and is in 17 other states, including Hawaii, along with parts of 4 other countries. It's in Australia, Canada, Great Britain, and Japan. Of course, the other countries are definitely going to be internet connection, but there you go. Talk to Australia or Great Britain or whatever. Of course, you can do that now fairly easily with D-Star and System Fusion, Echolink, IRLP, all those things. It's fairly easy and fairly common to be able to do stuff like that. But so, if you've ever seen a band plan, okay, you will notice that there are specific areas in the band that are for repeaters. In 6 meters, repeaters are typically found on 6 meters, 2 meters, 1.25 meters, and 70 centimeters is typically where they are. There is some that are on 28 megahertz on 10 meters. There's one on 33 centimeters and then 1.2 gigahertz. There are some on there. It is growing in more popularity, but typically the ones that are probably the most common are 2 meters, 440, and 220. Those are probably the most common, at least here in the United States. And they have two things really. One, you have coordination, and the coordination is done by a separate entity other than the FCC. And here in where I live in the DFW area, the frequencies are recorded by they're regulated by the Texas DHF FM Society. And basically what they do is they keep and make sure that a repeater isn't assigned to the same frequency within a certain distance of each other. So if you're within 20 miles of another repeater, they're not gonna allow you to put a repeater up on the same frequency. Which here in the DFW Metroplex, 2 meters is gone. 440 is all but gone. Really the only place it's fairly easy to get a repeater on is 220, at least for the three major bands. So if you live out in the sticks, it might not be such an interesting part. But if you live, DFW, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, the big major states here in Texas, those are the ones that you're probably going to have a hard time finding if you're looking to set up a repeater. And basically, this is to make sure there's no interference, of course. And if there is interference with some station, they are the intermediaries to resolve any issues. Somebody puts up a repeater and says, hey, this one's coordinated, this one's not. Guess what? The one that's not has to take theirs down or change the frequency or whatever. So you have that. You also have a standard offset. For 2 meters, the standard offset is 600 kilohertz. So like our local repeater here is 145.490, and that's the output frequency. The input frequency is the standard 600 kilohertz, so it is 144.890, 600 megahertz off. And this is typically the way it is on 2 meters. On 440, it's 5 megahertz. So our repeater that I'm a trustee on is on 443.125. On 440, you have a positive offset, which makes the input frequency 448.125. This is typically the way that they go. It hasn't always been this way. It used to be where you might have some weird offsets. There are still repeaters out there that have different offsets, but they're few and far between. So typically it's 0.6 megahertz or 600 kilohertz on 2 meters and 5 megahertz on 440. On the 220 bands, I honestly, my mind just went blank. I had it just a second ago and I don't remember what they actually is or what the offset is. If you know and you're listening, leave a comment in the show notes of today's episode. Let everybody know, or tell me at the very least. There is, sorry about that, my phone is dinging at me because my wife is going shopping, and me not turning on vibrate was not a good thing. But anyways, that's the way that it is. There is basically let's talk 2 meters here. 440, it's pretty much always positive, if I'm not mistaken. I believe when you get to the upper bands, there might be some that are negative. I have heard of some that are on like 450 or something like that, and they have the negative offset, but I think it's primarily positive offsets. But on 2 meters, it's a little bit different. On 2 meters, you have from 145.5 or something like that up to 147. is a negative. Basically, anything lower than 147.0 is a negative, and anything above 147 is a positive. But if you have a repeater on 147, it could be either negative or positive, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think it does. But anyways, that's what it is. If you get a repeater on, say, 146.94, it's going to have a negative offset because it's lower than 147. If you have a repeater on 147.22, which is also one of my club repeaters that I'm a trustee on, it's a positive offset, so it goes to 147.82 for the input. And anyways, it's really easy to change now. It used to not be that way. If you're trying to set up a repeater, you used to have to buy crystals, and they would be set on that one thing. If you were lucky, you had a couple channels that you could change to. Now it's super easy because it's all frequency agile. With the System Fusion repeater, it has a little standard 10 key type display, and you type in the frequency and input frequency and output frequency, and you're done. It's super easy. Not so much the way that it used to be. I'm glad that it's gone there now. So what other things do you have with repeaters that you have to worry about? We've covered the frequency, we've covered the offsets. What else? Okay, tones. Tones are a great thing. We've talked about this before. I don't think so much in the podcast episode, but I know I have written a blog post on it. There are sub-audible tones, which are called CTCSS, continuous... And my mind just went blank again. I hate it when that happens. But CTCSS, or PL tones, are what they call for short, are basically sub-audible tones that are transmitted automatically by your radio if you have it set to do so. That will allow the receiver in the repeater to open up and retransmit your transmission, or actually key the transceiver, I guess. It really receives pretty much everything, I believe, but it won't transmit. So if a repeater has the PL tone set, typically it's for, so that other repeaters won't interfere with it, or it won't get interference from, like intermod or electrical sources or something like that. There are open repeaters that don't have PL tones, but a lot of times if you get in an area where you have a lot of repeaters or a lot of interference, like in buildings or electrical substations or something like that, there's typically going to have a PL tone. So you're typically going to have one. But basically, like I said, your radio will automatically transmit this tone. You or anybody else will never hear it because it's most of the tones are below hearing level for humans. There are some that are just right at the very bottom of it. And if you have really good hearing, you can actually hear it, but typically those are not used. But anyways, you will key up, your radio will transmit that sub-audible tone. The repeater will check and see, okay, well, this is the right tone, so I'm going to start transmitting on my transmitter and retransmit what you're saying. And then it will basically, everybody will hear you, and you'll hold a conversation. And, that's what they're for. A lot of times they say that, you want to start your conversation on a repeater and change to a simplex frequency if possible. So if you and John Smith live close enough together where you can talk on simplex, but you want to, see if anybody else is out there, the majority of the time, you can call John Smith on the repeater, say, hey, if you got time to talk. He says, sure. Okay, well, let's QSY over to simplex. And the QSY, for those of y'all that don't know, is change to or move to. You go to your simplex frequency, you have your conversation, and then you switch back to your repeater. That's the way that it's supposed to be done. Doesn't always work that way because you can't always be close enough to somebody that you want to talk on simplex. So that's where you have your repeaters. So let's talk a little bit about types of repeaters. You have your conventional repeaters, which are basically what is commonplace now. their in-band repeaters is what they're typically, or what they used to be known as, basically. And that means is that you receive, or the repeater receives and transmits on the same band. This used to not be the case, but it is now. And what this requires is either two separate antennas or a piece of equipment called a duplexer. And a duplexer will basically, you'll hook your antenna to it. It will receive and transmit through one antenna, but it has two separate sets of filters to where your transmitter of your repeater doesn't interfere with the receiver of your repeater, if that makes any sense. So you hook your antenna to your duplexers. The receive side of your duplexer will be set to only allow the area of your input. So let's say, for example, you have a repeater on 145.49. Your receive side will be tuned in such a way where it only allows 144.89, plus or minus however much, to come into your repeater. On the transmit side of your duplexer, it only allows the frequency of 145.49 plus or minus to go out. So if you have these set right, your transmitter won't interfere with your receiver because they only allow that frequency to go through. This helps with interference. This helps with problems locally at the repeater site, interference type things. So you can either have a duplex or you can have two separate antennas. If you have two separate antennas, that means two sets of coax, and if you have a repeater, you know that coax is not cheap because typically you have a lot of it, and you want as low a loss as possible, so it's going to be kind of hard to, or kind of expensive to have two antennas, two sets of coax. So you always want, you want to run just one. So you have duplexers, and that's typically the way that a repeater is set up. There are some that have separate antennas, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later. In the past, and even really now to a certain degree, there are things that are called crossband repeaters. Now, this was used a lot in like the 60s and 70s, I believe, especially on like fire and law enforcement type repeaters. You would have a receive on one band and a transmit on another. In like the fire service, for example, there are several repeaters that had an input of 46 megahertz and an output of 152, give or take. This is also used in amateur radio, but not so much for actual repeaters, but this feature is built in to a lot of dual band mobile radios to where you can use them for short temporary type installations. It's also used in like police vehicles, fire vehicles, stuff like that. They'll have a mobile radio or a mini repeater or mobile repeater set up in a vehicle, and you can use your handheld transceiver to talk to your car, which talks to your dispatch or the repeater, the main repeater or whatever. So like on the amateur band, you can set up your car to crossband repeat. And I actually did this when I first started out. The first time I had a mobile radio, first time I had my HT, I couldn't hit the local repeater with my handheld in my house, and I didn't have a house radio. So I would set my mobile radio in my car to act as a repeater, and the frequency, the 145.49 that I keep talking about, was the repeater we had locally. So I would set my mobile radio to the repeater frequency on my 2-meter side and a simplex 440 frequency, and then I would set my handheld to talk on that 440 frequency, so I could sit in the comfort of my house and with my handheld in my hand. talking, and it would basically go from the 440 frequency of my handheld out to my car. My car would rebroadcast it to the repeater. The repeater would rebroadcast it again to everybody else, and then I'd have hold on my conversation. This is good for a short-term type thing. It does have its limitations though, because you don't have you can't have more than one person doing this, and you have to listen on a separate frequency, and so there are some limitations to it. However, there are ways around it as well. Motorola has a really nice little mobile repeater that they sell to law enforcement, where you can put these little mobile crossband repeaters in cars, and it transmits a tone as well. And if you have more than one car that has the mobile repeater in the same area, only one of them will crossband repeat. So there are ways around that. Most of the crossband repeaters are, at least the commercial ones, are no longer in service. They've been taken down for the conventional type repeaters nowadays. So that's the way it is. Okay, so we've talked about what repeaters are. We've talked about hardware, the duplexers for them. We've talked about the different types of repeater hardware that's out there. We've talked a little bit about the linking. Let's talk about some other types of repeaters. You have your amateur television repeaters, which you can do either ATV or slow scan TV. There are repeaters out there that will transmit full motion video. Typically, this is a crossband repeater type system. You'll have your input on 33 or the 23 centimeter band, and your output on 440 on the 70 centimeter band. The output of these is either on 421.25 or 426.25, which corresponds with standard television channel 57 and 58. So if you have an older TV that is cable radio, it has the analog TV type thing, you can tune to those two channels and watch what's being transmitted. There are some digital TV repeaters out there. Of course, they're going to be a whole lot more expensive. This is really prevalent in Europe. I'm not too sure about over here in America. I'm sure they probably are, since we're all digital TV now, but yeah. So there's also repeaters in satellites. I'm sure that if you've worked as a satellite, you've used a repeater. Of course you have. And basically, you can talk to the satellite retransmit back down to Earth. That's a repeater. You have a typical 12 to 15 minute window that you can do this on, so you have to have special equipment that does the azimuth and the rotation on a directed antenna to use it, or hold your hand up there and get lucky. I've never done satellite, so I'm not really sure exactly how you do it, but I would really like to actually try it one day, so we'll see what happens. There are actually some other types of repeaters out there that are known as simplex repeaters. And with simplex repeaters, you don't have to have your frequency pair, but they're not full duplex, hence the word simplex repeaters. These repeaters are basically store and repeat type things. You have it on one channel, typically a simplex, and it'll record for 30 seconds, and then when you unkey, it'll rebroadcast it. So we actually had this happen. One of my local ham operators, who is also a sheriff's deputy, somehow his simplex repeater got put on the sheriff channel and was doing this. Every time somebody would key up, it would record it and then rebroadcast it, so we would get echoes. It was it was very interesting. But anyways, basically what it does, it will record up to 30 seconds, you unkey it, retransmit. So if you have it at your house on a 100-foot tower, you can talk further away than just a standard simplex conversation would. It was a lot slower because you have to wait to transmit, but it is an option. There are repeaters called digipeaters, and this is basically for like packet radio or APRS, D-Star digital mode, System Fusion digital mode, stuff like that. Digipeaters are digital repeaters and are used for digital modes, like I said, for packet, for APRS, stuff like that. There are, let's see, I guess that's pretty much all the different types of repeaters that I can think of right now. So let's see, what else? Oh, what I was talking about a little bit before, okay? If you have a receive antenna and a transmit antenna, and you're trying to get good coverage all over your county, okay, there are ways that you can have multiple receivers in one transmitter. We're actually having that difficulty right here where I work at. We have our repeater on the far west side of our county. Granted, it's a very small county. It's like the second smallest in Texas. But we have our main repeater on the far west side of the county, and right smack dab in the middle is this big old hill. So we have like a dead zone of like 20 square miles or something like that, where you can't hit the repeater. And so we are building a 200-foot tower right here at our sheriff's office to act as a secondary receiver. And then we're going to use what is called a voter. And basically what this does is it will receive multiple inputs from different receivers. You can have, say, 4 different towers spread over a large area and one main transceiver. If your transceiver can reach the entire county but your receivers can't, because just say you're wanting to use handheld coverage for your entire county, you can set up multiple receivers, and this voter system will actually determine what receiver is receiving the signal the best and use that to transmit. And there are some systems out there that will scan the receiving stations at such a pace where you can have assemble, so to speak, a multi-syllable word, and each syllable will come from a different receiver. So it's pretty cool. Multiple times a second it will look at these different receivers and choose the best one. It's kind of like a cell phone system maybe, but not really. So yeah, that's a really neat little thing. I've actually wanted really to use one of these. We actually had talked about using one of these at some of our events. It'd be great for like simplex type setup, or like an emergency type setup if you don't have the tall towers and stuff like that. But anyways, so yeah, I guess that's about it on repeaters. They have lots of uses, and they're getting more and more every day. And people use them every day. So you have your nets on there. You have your like Skywarn stuff on there. You have just typical rag chewing on there. So repeaters are fun. They have great coverage, and sometimes they have a lot of use, sometimes not. I've heard a lot of stories about hams, and I've seen this myself, where 10-15 years ago the repeaters were used a whole lot more than they are today, and that's sad to say. When I first got started in this hobby, for the first 10-15 years or so, there would be somebody always talking on the repeater. You could turn on the radio and hear somebody talking pretty much any time. And nowadays, I'll turn on my radio when I leave work and say my call sign and hear nothing. all the way home, and it's like a 25-minute drive, and I'll hear nothing, and that's sad. So all of y'all out there, get out and use your repeaters. If you don't, get out there and talk on the radio. It's fun. It's what we, part of the reason that we got into the hobby is to talk. I'm not gonna say what I just thought. I'm just not. Yeah. So, anyways, I guess that about wraps up what a repeater is, what the uses are for, and stuff like that. So, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the show notes. You can find them at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/34. That's number 34. Leave those comments below, and I'll answer them, or we can have a discussion in the show notes. So please leave a comment. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. So yeah, okay, that about wraps it up. Let's head on over to our next segment, our Amateur Radio Club Spotlight. Hey everybody, we are talking with Fred Kimmerer, Alpha Bravo 1 Oscar Charlie. He is the president of the Nashua Area Radio Club in New Hampshire. Fred, why don't you say hello to everybody and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Great, Curtis. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your podcast. I'm currently president of the Nashua Area Radio Club. We're located or centered in southeast New Hampshire in the city of Nashua. And our club has been very, very active in bringing new people, and particularly young people, into amateur radio and introducing them to the hobby, helping them get their licenses, and helping them learn about amateur radio and build their first stations. I became president of the club about 6 months ago and held a number of different offices in the club prior to that. And the club has grown quite significantly in the past few years. We've gone from about 50 or 60 members over to over 120.
Wow.
In about a year and a half as a result of all the great work that the club has done to bring new folks into the hobby.
Well, that is awesome. So what do y'all do exactly to grow your club so much? In the past year or so, you basically doubled it, sounds like.
Right. So, probably the first thing that we do is that we offer license classes. We do the full set of licenses, technician, general, and extra, every spring and every fall. So we do 6 classes a year. We typically have classes of anywhere between about 15 and about 30 students. And in the last year and a half, we've run over 70 people through our license classes, with everyone just about earning either a license or an upgrade. So that's kind of the beginning of how we bring new folks into the club and into the hobby. We also have a whole program of activities to help folks get on the air or to use their new license privileges. We do, in addition to our regular club meeting, which occurs the first Tuesday of each month at the First Church in Nashua, we also hold what we call a tech night at the same location on the second Tuesday of each month. And what Tech Night is, it's a hands-on technical session that's put on by one or more of our club members to help folks learn about new parts of amateur radio. We've had build a station. We've had a session on software-defined radios, advanced repeater use, how to do field day for the first time. We did one on how to put up a VHF, like a repeater style or an HF style station. And those sessions are all video recorded and produced. Some of those sessions are available on our website so that folks who join the club and maybe want to learn about a certain aspect of amateur radio for the first time can get some help. We also have members-only forums on our website that deal with a variety of topics, Elmering, how to get on the air. Some of our members are teaching a CW class right now. We have a forum devoted to that so that folks can learn about how to do Morse code and become proficient at it. So we have a whole range of programs that are geared at getting people licensed, getting them upgraded, and then getting them on the air and helping them learn about amateur radio.
That's neat. Yeah, I don't remember if you've actually said your website address this time around. This is the second time we try to record this because of a technical glitch on my end. So, Fred, what is the call your website?
Yep, it's pretty simple. It's N1FD, that's November 1 Fox Delta.org, or as we like to think of it, number 1 Field Day. N1FD is our club call sign, and the club, among other things, has a long history of Field Day. If you go to our website and you go to the About the Club menu, there's a choice on there that's called Learn About Our Club, and that's a great place for folks to go to kind of see what we're about and see what some of the activities are that are going on in the Nashua Radio Club.
Cool. So other than your meetings, what other kind of like meeting type things, I guess, do you have, like nets and stuff like that?
Right, got it. Yeah, so we have a weekly 10-meter net that takes place on Sunday nights at 8:30 Eastern Time. That's I think the next one's going to be on 28.480. That's our main club net. We've also recently secured use of a local repeater network, the N1MNO network in New Hampshire. And a couple folks in our club are putting together a youth net that we're going to be beginning on that repeater network here in about a month or so, aimed at giving younger folks a chance to have their own amateur radio experience as part of the club. We do a lot of other stuff as well. We're very heavily involved in National Park on the Air activations. The club's done several of those, making over 1,000 contacts using our club call sign in the National Parks on the Air program.
Wow.
And Field Day is probably our biggest yearly club activity. We're typically 7 or 8 alpha, quite large Field Day stations. And we have WRTC. The Radio Olympics setups, we were very active in that. It took place up in the Boston area last year, or 2 years ago, I should say. And we were lucky enough to have the club be able to purchase several tower kits, and we have beams and all. We've done amateur television as part of Field Day. We've done satellite contacts as part of Field Day. We have a very active group of folks that are interested in VHF and up, so we typically have a 6-meter station and all that. So that's yet another activity that we do as part of our club. So a great deal of what we're about is being on the air on HF, and increasingly also activity on VHF, everything from repeaters to amateur television to weak signal stuff and so on.
Sounds like y'all have a lot of stuff going on. I actually had a podcast episode not too long ago. It's episode number 16 for anybody that's interested on the National Parks and Wildlife. And you can find that at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/16. Or you can go directly to the ARRL website at npota.awrl.org for more information on that. We just passed Field Day not too long ago and actually had a guest several episodes ago. I cannot remember which episode exactly it was, but I was doing this for my club spotlight, and they actually ran like a 26 alpha, and it was like this huge thing. Like, how do you fit so many antennas and so many transmitters in a small area? 7 or 8, yeah, I can understand that, but 26, that's just out there, really.
Well, probably at 26 alpha, there was probably a lot of involvement on the VHF and UHF bands, and those are a little easier to co-locate than HF stuff is. But the way we approach that is we use beams for 20, 15, and 10 Yagi antennas, and we have triplexers basically that allow 3 stations each to share one of those Yagis and use it simultaneously. We do that on the CW and on the phone side, and then with filters and a little other creativity in how we lay our antennas out, we can fit 7 or 8 alpha in probably an area that's maybe, a couple hundred yards end to end or a little more than that.
Yeah, the topic of today that we're going to talk about in the tech corner of this podcast is repeaters. And I was actually, looking at it, and one of the things that I mentioned was using a diplexer for sharing 2 repeaters in one antenna, and I never really thought about that for a Field Day setup sharing an antenna. There's so much aspects. I've been a ham now for about 21 years, and there's so many aspects of this hobby that I've never done, that I have no idea about, and that I'm learning about by doing this podcast and by doing my blog, and it just it's a never-ending learning experience, and that's what makes this hobby so great, I think.
Yes, you're very right about that, Curtis. It's a hobby for a lifetime. It really is. No matter how much you've done in this hobby, no one ever begins to approach to doing it all. And I do really relate to what you're saying about getting involved with a blog or a podcast to learn more. My wife and I, Anita, AB1QB, basically are pretty new hams. We've only been licensed for a little over 5 years each. And one of the things we did when we first started out is we started a blog as we went through our early ham experience, built our station, our base station, and our mobile HF station, and kind of kept that as our diary. It's become quite a resource to the ham community. It's stationproject.wordpress.com, and there are over 150 articles on that particular blog about lots of different topics in amateur radio. So I can really relate to what you're saying about blogging as a learning experience.
Yeah. So again, if y'all missed that, it's stationproject.wordpress.com. I will have a link in the show notes of today's episode to that blog there. Okay, so we've talked about National Parks in the Air, Field Day, several other things. I don't remember if we talked about this time around, but I noticed that y'all had a winning entry this year in a contest.
Yes, we did. This is all kind of part of our outreach to get folks active in amateur radio. My wife Anita has been very involved in the ARL Rookie Roundup. When she was first licensed, she competed in particularly the digital aspect of that contest and won it several times. We have a fairly good multi-one contest station in our home that we built. And so we've opened that up to all of our new licensees, the folks that have helped work with us in the club to get their licenses through our classes, to compete in the ARL Rookie Roundup as an introduction to contesting. And we use that as a way to get people excited about HF and to help some of the new folks in the club learn about how to be contesters. We entered using our club's call sign N1FD in the ARL Rookie Roundup sideband, and then again in the ARL Rookie Roundup RIDI in the high power categories, and we won the multi-op category for Area 1 both times. So we're really happy about that and happy for our new licensees that are doing so well in their early contest experience. Several of the more senior members in our club who are really good CW operators are in the process of teaching a Morse code course, and quite a few of the new folks that have received their licenses in the club are going through that, and we hope to mount a multi-op entry in the ARL Rookie Roundup CW contest coming up later this year, which, if we were able to win that one, would mean that the club would win the multi-op category Area 1 for all three versions of that contest this year, which would be a great accomplishment for our group.
Wow, that would be awesome. So I guess that's about all that I have. Is there anything else, Fred, that you want to say to everybody or to mention?
Sure. One thing I'll just mention for the folks in the area, we have quite an interesting visitor from the ARL coming to our next club meeting in September. One of our new members was down at ARL headquarters in Connecticut a few months back, and talking about all the experiences that he had with being a new member in our club, and quite positive about us. And apparently Tom Gallagher, the new CEO of the ARL, was standing in the room at the time, overheard all this and said, and approached him and said, I want to come to your club meeting and talk to your club. It sounds like your work on youth outreach and all the work we're trying to do to get people licensed and active is something that I'm really interested in. And I'd like to share my thoughts on that. So we've got Tom Gallagher scheduled for our next club meeting. It'll be this first Tuesday in September, and we've secured a larger room so that we can accommodate not only our own club, but members from other clubs in the area. It's at the Nashua Public Library, and you can find all the details on the location and the meeting on our club calendar on our website. It starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and maybe some of your listeners, if they're in the area, would like to come hear what Tom has to say.
I'll probably have to put out a pre-alert for this episode, because this episode doesn't go out until the 8th, and your meeting's on the 6th. So, unfortunately, I missed it by just a couple of days, but I will try to send that alert to all my listeners and stuff on that meeting. So maybe if they are in the area and they don't know about it, they can head on over there. So, Fred, thanks again for coming on in such short notice. I actually emailed Fred last night or yesterday evening sometime, and knew it was on short notice, really didn't expect a response, and Fred just called me up out of the blue on Skype and did this interview for me twice, actually. So, Fred, thanks again for coming on, and I do appreciate it so very much. This episode, like I said, will be coming out on the 8th, and I'll send you notification on that. So, I guess, Fred, 73 to you.
Thank you, Curtis. We really appreciate the opportunity to be part of your podcast. 73. Bye-bye.
Alrighty, so in this segment of the Everything Ham Radio podcast, episode number 34, let's talk about some upcoming events. What do we got coming up? First off, let's talk about contests. According to the ARRL website, there are 2 of them that are coming up within the next 2 weeks. There is the September VHF contest. The object of the September VHF contest is for amateurs in the US and Canada and their possessions to work as many amateur stations in as many different 2 degree by 1 degree maidenhead grid squares as possible, using authorized frequencies above 50 megahertz. So basically, from 6 meters up, 6 meters, 2 meters, 70 centimeters, all that, within 2 degrees and 1 degree by 1 degree maidenhead. So you have to use that. You cannot use repeaters. You cannot use things like Echolink. It has to be like single sideband or FM, and you gotta contact as many people as you can in neighboring grid squares. This is the second full weekend of September, beginning at 1800 UTC on Saturday and runs through 2:59 UTC on Monday. So from September 10th at 1800 to the 12th at 2:59. You have to have your log submitted, must be emailed or postmarked no later than 0300 UTC Wednesday, October the 12th, 2016. You can email the logs to septembervhf@arrl.org. Okay, next up on the upcoming events is the 10 gigahertz and up event. The objective of the 10 gigahertz and up is for North American amateurs to work as many amateur stations in as many different locations as possible in North America on bands from 10 gigahertz through light. Amateurs are encouraged to operate from more than one location during this event. See detailed rules for restrictions. And there is a link in the show notes for the ARRL site for this thing. So head on over there and get some additional rules. Dates. This will be the 3rd full weekend of August and September. August is already come and gone. The next section of this will be September 17th and 18th, 2016. Operation may take place for 24 hours total on each contest weekend. Each weekend begins at 6 a.m. local Saturday through 12 midnight locally on Sunday. So there you go. That's kind of weird. I guess maybe because it's such a low range band, they're not really worried about UTC time. It's all local time. You must have your log submitted by 0000 hours UTC on Tuesday, October the 18th. Okay, that is all the upcoming contests that are listed on the ARRL anyways. If you have further contests that are going on, QSO parties or what have you, leave a comment in the show notes at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/34 and let everybody know about it so we can get you some more contacts. Okay, so next up, Hamfest. There are a lot of Hamfest over the next 2 weekends. It really surprised me when I was going through the list on the ARRL website on how many there actually were. So, there is links to all of these in the show notes. I'm going to go through them pretty fast since there are so many. Okay, so on the 9th, there's a 47th annual Queen Wilhelmina Hamfest in Mena, Arizona, New England Division Convention in Boxborough, Massachusetts. On the 10th, there is the AK-1 SAR-BEN, Amateur Radio Club Flea Estates, I'm guessing. Probably ran out of characters there on the listing. In Springfield, NE is what? Nebraska? I think. Oh goodness, where is it at? Hold on, I'm gonna have to pause this. I'll be right back. Okay, and I'm back, and I was right. It is in Nebraska. Yeah, it's located at the Sharpie County Fairgrounds 4-H Building, 100 Main Street, Springfield, Nebraska. Okay, back to the list. Let's see. The GMARC September Trunk Swap in Shelby Townsend, Michigan. Kentucky State Convention, Greater Louisville Hamfest 2016 in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. Lubbock ARC 3rd Annual Hamfest in Lubbock, Texas. That's actually not too far from me. However, I am working, so I can't go to it. Just not fair. Let's see. Rush City Radio Rendezvous in Rush City, Minnesota. Virginia Section Convention, Virginia Beach Hamfest, located in Virginia Beach, Virginia. What do you know? Okay, on the 11th, the 38th Annual Gloucester County ARC Hamfest in Maluka Hill, New Jersey. The BC ARA Swap Fest in Butler, Pennsylvania. Findlay Hamfest in Findlay, Ohio. Lancaster, New York Hamfest in Lancaster, New York. And the Saratoga County New York Hamfest in Ballston Spa, New York. Next weekend, September the 16th, the ARRL and TAPR Digital Communications Conference in St. Petersburg, Florida. And the W9DX DX Convention and Banquet in Schaumburg, Illinois. On the 17th, the All Arkansas Hamfest in Little Rock, Arkansas. Augusta Hamfest in Grovetown, Georgia. The Gadsden Hamfest in Atala, I guess, Alabama. The GRA Hamfest 2016 in Wyoming, Michigan. Yeah. The Illinois State Convention, Peoria Superfest in Peoria, Illinois. The Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana Hamfest in Cincinnati, Ohio. St. Crow Valley ARC Hamfest in Alexander, Maine, I believe, ME. 10th Annual Sacramento Valley Hamfest in Lincoln, California. And on the 18th, the Adrian Hamfest in Adrian, Michigan. Flea at MIT at Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the Garden State ARA Hamfest in Trenton Falls, New Jersey. And that wraps it up for upcoming events. Next up is the news. Good evening, everybody. My name is Curtis, and this is the K5CLM News Broadcast. The Cowboys are pretty well screwed when it comes to Tony Romo playing again. Not even first game, and he's already out with a back injury. Shame on him. That's just really bad. But y'all don't really want to hear about this. Y'all want to hear about amateur radio news, so let's go to that, okay? First off, ARRL CEO Tom Gallagher in Y2RF. He is a New York City Marathon volunteer since 1981. That's a long time to volunteer for one event. Anyways, he is urging amateur radios in the New York metropolitan area to join him on the race course this fall to, as he put it, participate in the one of the world's most important public service events. On Sunday, November 6th, amateur radio volunteers will provide communication support for the 46th running of the TCS New York City Marathon. The marathon starts near the Verrazano Narrows Bridge on Staten Island and continues through Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx before finishing 26.2 miles later in Manhattan's Central Park. Amateur radio volunteers provide emergency medical and logistical communications throughout the course, working in concert with the New York City Police Department and Fire Department, and as well as the New York Emergency Medical Services, to aid more than the 50,000 athletes expected to take part this year. So if you are going to be in the New York area, if you live in the New York area, help out Tom Gallagher with volunteering for the marathon there. It was established in 1970 as a low-budget event confined to Central Park. The first marathon attracted 127 entrants. In 1976, the U.S. bicentennial year, the marathon was expanded to encompass the city's 5 boroughs. For many years, Steve I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, W2ML, who is now an SK, served as the marathon's communications director, overseeing the approximately 400 ham radio volunteers supporting the race communications. Inducted in the CQ Amateur Radio Hall of Fame a week before he died in 2012. He also served as the ARRL Hudson Division Director and as ARRL First Vice President. So, again, if you're going to be up in the New York area, help out. I'm sure they need a bunch of help. Okay, so next in the news, ham radio outlet refurbishes, reopens, and reuses former AES Milwaukee location. It is now their flagship store. It's the biggest one they got, right? So the ham radio outlet, actually let me back up here, rewind, hit the back button a couple times on your remote. Okay, this is what happened. So AES, who has been in business now for a long time, 59 years they've been a ham radio equipment supplier, right? So the first part, let's see, okay, I'm not a very good news anchor here, guys. I'm trying to make this really entertaining for you, but so on July 28th, the AES closed its Milwaukee, Las Vegas, Cleveland, and Orlando outlet stores, following a surprise announcement that was made 4 weeks earlier. So the first part of July, they announced that they were going out of business, right? So a couple weeks after the announcement was made, sometime around July 15th or something like that, if memory serves me correctly, ham radio and outlet announced their plans to make over the Milwaukee outlet store and reopen it as a superstore. And I'm going to put a link. Actually, there already is a link in the show notes of today's episode, taken by a Dan, if I apologize if you listen and I butcher your name here, it's Van Dievenhalven, Dan Van Dievenhalven, something like that. His call sign is November 9, Lima Victor Sierra. He visited the HRO Milwaukee location on opening day, camera in hand, and he posted a video of his brief tour on YouTube. One of the things that he said was, one of the first things that caught my eye was the radio demo area. He says that in his video, they actually got radios that you can try out. A row of 8 Carol's, something like that, each with a different piece of gear, ready to use, stretches along a part of one wall of the store. The Milwaukee store is 5,000 square feet of amateur radio superness here. Amateur radio equipment, antennas, books, and accessories. The family-owned business, HRO, is the world's largest amateur radio dealership, with 14 locations from New England to the West Coast. It opened a new outlet in Plano, just right up the road from me, about an hour and a half or so drive, in early 2015, and relocated and expanded its Portland, Oregon store, which opened in late July. HRO had planned the weekends of September 10th, 17th, 24th, and October 1st for the grand opening of its Portland store, and October 1st, 8th, 15th, and 22nd for the grand opening of the new Milwaukee outlet. So, if you live in Portland area, and you don't know this, shame on you, HRO, this weekend starting, is the first weekend of its grand reopening of the Portland store. So go there, get the good deals. I'm sure they'll have plenty of them. So that about wraps it up for the news. I kind of wish I could have had more. I probably can have more, but I'm going to wait because right now it's the 3rd. But no, I'm not going to. Man, I wish I had another story. I'm sure there's probably going to be a lot more stories between now and then, and this is probably going to be the downfall of this segment, is that it's going to be week-old news. That's just bummer. Because this episode goes out on Thursday, so that's like 5 days from now, and I need to get it uploaded tomorrow. Anyways, I guess that's going to have to be the news. Old news. And actually, this is like a couple days old anyways, but I don't know what I'm going to do. So let me know what y'all think about this on this news segment. Leave a comment in the show notes of this episode. Let me know what you think. Do y'all think that I should continue to do this news thing? I kind of like it, being that it's something that I originally planned. Originally I planned to do the Tech Corner, a Amateur Radio Club Spotlight, and a news. But I wanted to shrink it down into like 30 minutes. Well, here it is, an hour and 10 minutes or so, and I haven't even done my final cuts and editing and stuff like that. I still got other stuff to put in. So tell me what you think. You think I should have this new segment, or being that it's going to be 4 days old or so between the time that I finish recording and the time that the episode is released, do y'all think I should continue to do the news segment? Let me know in the comments. everythinghamradio.com/podcast/34. That's number 34. Leave it in the show notes and let me know what you think. Also, you can tweet me at K5CLM, or you can leave it on Facebook or on YouTube. And so, yeah, let me know what you think, guys. I'm not too sure about this. I have the same concerns as I did when I first started, when I first dropped this news segment. But I kind of like it, but I don't know. Let me know what you think. Okay, guys? Okay, that's all. That's a wrap. Until next time, the news is over. Alrighty, everybody. This is Curtis, K5CLM, and I am still the host of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. This is the first episode where we're doing this new format style thing here. Please let me know what you think about it. Let me know in the show notes. Leave a comment. everythinghamradio.com/podcast/34. Let me know what you thought about the news, the upcoming events, of course, the Amateur Radio Club Spotlight. Thank you to Fred Kemmerer, Alpha Bravo 1 Oscar Charlie, the president of the Nashua Area Radio Club, for the short notice interview. He actually surprised me. And then thank you again, Fred, for re-recording it since I didn't record it the first time. Thanks to a being ill-prepared, I guess. So again, thanks, Fred, and head on over to their website, n1fd.org. Anyways, tell me what you thought about it. This is going about a minute 15 or so, hopefully after a minute 15, an hour and 15 minutes or so after I probably get all of the final editing done. So a lot better than it used to be. When I first started, I'm sure I probably said this before, but I originally started on a topic of the day, the Amateur Radio Club Spotlight, and the news. I wasn't too sure about it. Couple episodes in, I decided not to do the news since there was a couple days lead time from the time that I actually recorded it and the time that I posted it, and that's what's basically going to happen now. It's going to be like about a 5-day span. So let me know what you thought overall. Let me know what you thought on the news. You could do that on the show notes, Facebook page, Twitter, YouTube, all that stuff. So anyways, I guess that's about it. If you like what you heard here on this episode and you would like to help out financially, I would greatly appreciate it. You can do that one of several ways, or two or three of several ways. First off, you can make a one-time donation through PayPal. You can find a link to the PayPal thing down the bottom of the show notes. You can also be a monthly contributor through Patreon, and I think I'm going to actually switch it over to a episode base rather than a monthly base. The one Patreon follower that I did have has since pulled his contribution. Sorry about that, Mark. Hope it wasn't something I did. Hope you still enjoy the podcast. Anyways, I'm thinking of making a little bit of changes on there, and the last way to do it, simply buy stuff through Amazon.com using my affiliate code. If you go to everythinghamradio.com/support, you will find links to all these on how to do it, what you need to change as far as your Amazon bookmark goes, and a portion of what you buy will go to support this podcast. You won't see any changes. There will not be any changes to your cost of your items. I just get a small advertising fee, basically. So, again, thank you if you choose to support. I understand if you do not, if you cannot. Trust me, I do. So I guess that about wraps it up. So if you have not subscribed to my email list, don't forget to do that. You can do that at everythinghamradio.com/podcast, or no, everythinghamradio.com/subscribe. You can also follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/everythinghamradio, on my new YouTube page at youtube.com/everythinghamradio. You can follow me on Twitter at K5CLM, and there's a couple other social media sites that I do publish to. I do not pay attention a whole lot to them, but if you want to follow me on them, you can find links to them on the menu bar at the top of the page under social media, or under social, I think. So I guess that about wraps it up. So until next time, this is K5CLM signing out. 73, y'all.